Right, okay, so this is our second ever Metaverse-based conversation on stage, and we've done it all in 1 year. This is the year of the Metaverse, definitely. So I'm on stage today with Lewis Wiltshire, CEO of 7 League, and Matt Stagg, BT Sport Director, Warner Brothers Discovery Sports as well. Yeah, little crossover there. Okay, so let's start with, first of all, not everyone may know where 7 League comes from. Obviously, everyone knows where you guys are from. But let's start with how your company's first kind of touched on the Metaverse and you know, why you're here today on stage. Lewis.
Yeah, well, from our point of view, so 7 League is a digital consultancy and agency. We advise most of the biggest sports rights holders in the world on all things digital. And so we're now part of IMG, so we're IMG Media's digital agency. And of course, that includes now moving from Web 2 into Web 3 as all sports rights holders and sports broadcasters move from Web 2 into Web 3. That means that we're constantly advising them on various Web 3 elements, including Metaverse.
Sure. And then, Matt, as a broadcaster, you know, how did BT Sport originally get into the whole Metaverse thing? 'Cause you've done trials and things like that.
Yeah, originally we hadn't really looked at Metaverse. We were looking at new immersive experiences. Yeah. You know, as we've always said, we'll look at any new technology that takes the fan closer to the heart of sport. And obviously, immersive does exactly that. You know, so obviously, we see the new technologies and Metaverse coming around. For us, it was let's first of all work out what we want to do, what experiences we want, and then see what enables that. You know, Web 3. So, you know, we've focused in, you know, any company or broadcaster who is starting out looking at this, don't focus on the technology and the words. Focus on what experiences you want. So we were fundamentally, how can we, so if you're a fan, you want to be in the stadium or at the event. If you can, your next best option is in front of the biggest screen you can get with your friends. You know, that's a massive gap that we feel new technologies can narrow it. So, you know, we can take you closer to the stadium if you can't be there for whatever reasons. And in that, Web 3, XR, Metaverse is going to play a part as it evolves.
Yeah, it's like all the things you were playing with suddenly got a label. Like,
exactly. Yeah.
And, you know, where are you each right now in terms of the Metaverse? So maybe we can talk about some of the trials that you've been doing.
Yes, so we had a project called, a really catchy creative name, 5G Edge XR. It was an R&D, so that's why. And we were looking at how we can use new and emerging technology to really engage fans in new things. So not just because, yeah, they look great, and this is, you know, and we'll come on to what they look like, but actually, how do we do this? And then how do we do it at scale? You know, one thing, a proof of concept is great, but then you need to look at how would we roll this out? What would it look like? So we were looking at new things using VR headsets, not quite so much at the moment, because really, you know, the opportunities, do you want to be at home when you've got, you know, all of the extra bits that broadcasters put on? Do you want to put a headset and sit in a single seat in a stadium because, you know, you're not there and you're not getting the other stuff you get at home? So we were looking at some of that, how you can move around the stadium. The other one was using XR glasses. So these are the ones that have full optics. So we'll be sat here, and then you get the overlays, and that's when you really get, you know, powerful opportunities to look at things. So one of the ones we did was real-time holographic boxing. So we had multiple cameras from a company called Condensed Reality. We had spatial audio, which is always key in any immersive, is, you know, if you've got the audio wrong, the immersive experience doesn't work. In fact, it can be worse than not doing it, because you'll be on one side of a boxing ring hearing the punch from over there. Right. So, and you could walk around in real time, and you actually were walking around a a ring, but you maintain that social viewing experience because you can still see your friends. And then the other side of things is, what can we do for fans in the stadium with the rich data points that we give to people at home? So that's where we can, we teamed up with a company called Sportable, who had sensors in their ball. They're actually doing very well now. I think it was in some of the autumn internationals. And that allows us to track where the ball is, and using low latency technologies like 5G with offloading compute power, we can then replay that, overlay that to the glasses, see exactly where that ball is in space and time. So we can see hang time, know how fast the ball's going. So that gives a new experience to both people at home and in the stadium.
Great. And then for you, Lewis, you're obviously advising your clients on what to do in terms of the metaverse, but what are you advising them not to do?
Yeah, we say no on behalf of our clients as much as we say yes, maybe even more so. So I mean, the thing is, we have to do a small reality check on the word metaverse, which is that there's almost two versions of the word. There's what we're seeing currently, which is basically VR. There's nothing wrong with VR. It's just that about 1 year ago, when Mark Zuckerberg decided to rename Facebook as Meta because he had a long-term vision for a metaverse future, we all just collectively as an industry decided to start calling VR Metaverse, which these are just words, right? So that's broadly fine. But nothing that we're seeing at the moment in terms of VR is what Zuckerberg intended the metaverse to become. And I think we believe that there is a 10-year vision, which certainly Facebook and Meta have, to recreate a world where we live, work, and play. And this year's collab, or the collab that was announced very recently between Microsoft and Meta to put Microsoft Office, so work tools, into the metaverse. So it's not just about gaming, because by the way, there's only about 200 million hardcore gamers in the world, people that sort of regularly use consoles and sort of have a serious gaming experience. Obviously, if you include things like Candy Crush and stuff that we play on our phones, then that number goes up very considerably. But there's only about 200 million sort of hardcore gamers in the world. So if we only ever think about the metaverse as a gaming experience, it's very limited. So we think that the partnership between Microsoft and Meta was very interesting in that regard, and therefore we think that there is something quite compelling about 10 years hence about live, work and play in the metaverse. Do a day's work, then watch BT Sport, watch a game in that environment. But for now, what we're basically talking about is VR. So for now, we advise our clients on, you could do this, but at the moment what you're doing is VR. You're just calling it metaverse, and there might be a reason why you want to call it metaverse for marketing purposes or revenue. But let's be honest about where we are now in the industry, and then let's be honest about where we want to get to together.
Sure, yes, yeah. And on, we've spoken about, what it can actually, what the value is there. So on the value for rights holders, so the clubs, the leagues, the federations, broadcasters, what's the point of it? And why do we actually need it? I mean, this comes to not technology for technology's sake. And someone said to me earlier today that it's a fad and the metaverse is dead. He's not listening. He's sat there on his phone. But yeah, where are we?
I mean, it broadly doesn't exist yet. So if it is dead already, that even by tech standards, that is an incredible Gartner hype cycle. Sports rights holders only really want two things, which is more audiences and more money, right? I mean, broadly, on the business side of things, of course, on the sports side of things, they want to win trophies and all that stuff. But in terms of the business of sports, like any business, really, you want more, you want greater audiences and you want more revenue. To the extent that Web3 can contribute to those things, of course, things like NFTs and can help to bring more revenue in, and as well as more audiences. Blockchain, I think, can solve a bunch of problems. Like blockchain might potentially be the end of ticket touting, which is attractive for sports rights holders. Once we've got a kind of an irrefutable proof of online identity and ownership. Crypto has gone up and down, quite literally, but will play some kind of a part. And then Metaverse, as one of the key sort of tenets of Web3, I think there's something really compelling about the fact that it can bring people in new and interesting ways, not just on the broadcast side, but replacing an in-person experience, as Matt talked about earlier in terms of stadium.
Yes, Matt.
Yeah, it's quite interesting because it plays there. What Lewis said was, so there's been some trials, and as always, we've been very clear that we won't do something just to be first. If we are first at it, that's great. That's our innovation. That's our DNA. But, you know, I wasn't going to bring out a proof of concept that says, right, all put your VR headsets on. You're all going to meet your avatars in a room and you're going to watch telly. Because that's, you know, you may as well just get your mates round. However, if we looked at how could that work, and again, you know, it was interesting because Mike was talking about earlier on about football and the way the pitch is and how that, you know, the 916 and how you work all that out. Well, actually, to do things in the metaverse around like volumetric capture of football is really difficult. However, because of the amount of cameras you would need, there's been stuff done. You know, Intel did some stuff around True View, but that was for editorial. So, but however, a boxing match, like we said, and you can put the boxing match there. Well, now I can see if you've got people all over, friends, then I can see an advantage of being in a virtual world where you go into that, because you can walk around the ring, but you're actually seeing it and it's real. But just doing something because you need to exist in a virtual world isn't going to work. And that goes back to what underpins all of this is, what do you want to do for your fan or your customer? And then why are you doing it? Because just, you know, go build me a metaverse, you know, we have to, you know, and the one other thing that is key and a barrier to entry is how many people are you addressing? Because these things aren't going to be cheap. So, you know, you have to look at device density. You know, even VR headsets, Oculus, etc., they have a large device density in case of augmented reality glasses. But it's not just how many devices are out there. How many devices are out there with people who want to engage with sport in this way? They're also subscribers of yours. And then you start to get, you know, you dilute that and then say, perhaps now's not the time. However, you know, but maybe this experience is, you know, and it was the same when we looked at Watch Together. It filled a gap, which was people couldn't be together, so it did that. And so that's where we see this, is filling that gap between stadium and home.
Right. And is, you know, what's the, you've spoken a lot about, you know, the fan experience and that kind of thing. So what's the timeline between, I mean, crystal ball is FutureSPORT. You know, how long is this going to take? Where are we going to, what are the steps? And will maybe we get to a point where someone says, you know, it seemed like a good idea just after the pandemic and everyone was talking about this stuff, but do we actually really need it? Or can we just, you know, hop on a plane, fly to Dubai, go and watch the fight?
Well, I think I believe the story is apocryphal, but the famous quote that's attributed to Henry Ford about, if I asked people what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse, right? You know, I think there is this myth with technology that if we, you know, what problem is it solving? Which more or less you know, that's not really how technology works, right? Technology works by iterating on top of previous innovations and by people finding a use for it, and then people realizing that there's something useful there that we probably didn't even intend, and then building on top of that, and that's how great tech gets built. I think in this case we have to remember that you know, Web 2 won't just end, you know, like we decide that like 2024 is when Web 2 ends and Web 3 begins. Not really how it works. You know, we know from when Web 1 went into Web 2 that there is a grey period where we're sort of somewhere in between the two eras. We also know that the biggest winners of any internet era won't be immediately apparent at the beginning of that era. So for sure, the biggest winners of Web 2, Facebook, obviously Instagram, part of the same group, Twitter, maybe Snapchat. You could look at TikTok. TikTok for sure didn't even emerge until really like the last 5 years of a 20-year Web 2 era. So I think in Web 3 we're looking at probably, you know, it's starting more or less from now. I think, you know, you could say in as much as TikTok is a streaming platform, not a social network, that the era of the social networks dominating digital is probably starting to come to a close, and the era of the streamers is really now becoming apparent. But I think that will continue now over the next sort of 10 to 15, maybe even 20 years, and that we really won't know the biggest winners of that era until probably 5 years hence.
Right, yeah. And then, you know, how are you each finding working with different rights holders? You know, you're the broadcaster, but, you know, who's leading the adventure for Web 3.0 and the Metaverse? You know, and, you know, who should be leading? Who needs to be pushed to the front a bit more?
So for us, it's not a case of leading the metaverse. It's a case of leading innovation so that new experiences can enhance it. And I think, and it's sort of followed between them both, everybody talks about, you know, oh, we're not going to go to the stadium anymore. Everyone's going to stay at home on their headsets. That's no good. Well, actually, we have to remember we're in this industry, and we forget some people will never go to a Premier League match. You know, for whatever reasons, could be accessibility, you know, affluency. It's very expensive. You look in the US, very few people ever go to an NBA match. So actually, it's not just a replacement. Oh, I would have gone there. Well, that's fine for us. We're in the industry. We can go and get tickets. But some people will never go. And I think that's where we also need to look at, we're not necessarily making a metaverse for these people and trying to draw them in. We may be able to make a experience happen for someone else. You know, can we look at, you know, and clubs have something to play in this, and right holders, you know, can we sell a virtual season ticket? I don't know, but that, you know, that's when we come to, you know, NFT. Can we move around the stadium? If you're not there, you can sit in any seat, and we always sort of joke every seat's the best seat in the house. But, you know, and there's in-stadium as well. This is why there's iterations a bit. Because if I'm a season ticket holder, then I've only ever sat in that seat. And if I was, it'd be a really cheap seat. So I'd be sat behind a post. And why can't I see the goal from over there? So why can't you, you know, using your phone even from now and as we move towards more immersive, move around? So I think people focus on when we're having the metaverse and why are we having it. And I think it's more about how do we evolve experiences as time goes on and new things. And, you know, we may get, you have to have a destination, and then you have to have the understanding and flexibility to say it might change, and you have to react to that change. If you blindly go on when, you know, these devices you based it on aren't selling, or, you know, Apple don't bring out some AR, you have to know when to draw back from it.
Yeah, yeah. And what do you think is going to take the metaverse mainstream in sports broadcasting? So you mentioned Microsoft earlier.
Yeah, look, I think when you're doing the last session of the day before people go and have a drink of wine or beer, what they really want to hear about is Microsoft Office. But, like, no, I do think that I genuinely think that the collab between Microsoft and Meta was interesting, because I said earlier that if we just rely on this as gaming, and that is, for me, that's the biggest kind of mistake that anyone makes when they talk about the metaverse now, is to assume that it's going to be some sort of much more enhanced gaming experience, because proven to be, you know, a very high number of millions of people, but nevertheless capped at a certain level. There are many more people in the world that use Microsoft Office than do serious gaming. How depressing a thought is that? But true, right? Excel and PowerPoint and, you know, all that good stuff. So I think if there is a world, and it kind of builds on Matt's point, that where we are in an environment where we put a pair of Meta or Apple you know, VR headset on, and we are doing our daily work through some sort of, and often, by the way, that's how laptops and personal computers became, you know, completely common, is people's offices paid for them, people's employers paid for the hardware, and then they thought, oh, the laptop is quite a useful thing to have in the home. So I can absolutely see that would be the way it would go with VR headsets as well, and then you do a day's work in there, and then you might play some sort of a gaming experience, but that will become much more common, and then absolutely then kick back and watch a World Cup game. But I think that broadly will be the trajectory. Yeah.
Matt?
I think for one of the key pieces is we need to reset expectations. When you look at how high expectations can be set early on, you've got Neil Stephenson's Snow Crash and Ready Player One, which is so far in the future, but so exciting. You know, oh, I can actually go in and live a virtual world and be whoever, and I interact with my friends in exactly the same ways, but we can go and do whatever. We can go to a theme park, or we can go and watch car racing, or we can race our own cars. And we've started with Microsoft Word. But I think that is a great way of saying, you know, let's reset expectations, because that's what you think you're getting. but we're a long way, and we're starting here, and it has to enhance, you know. That works, you know, enhancing, you know, we're used to a 2D screen on Zoom, so if you're then in an office environment, we're used to maybe sitting on our own, you know, some people can't get out.
Yeah.
Okay, well now we can take you there. But yeah, we're not going to be, we're not going to be quite there on some of those you know, really exciting things. Certainly for, you know, there's no reason that it won't go that way. But very, very far off, and it is baby steps at the moment. Mm-hmm.
But, you know, if rights holders wait until this thing is perfectly built, then that's too late. Right. You know, sort of, we have an expression that we use, which is everyone wants to be first as long as someone else has done it before. I.e., like, I want to be really first, I want to be innovative, but like, is it going to work? Well, then you need to test and learn and start to prepare for that world. Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. No, totally, and that's why we're doing all of the trials, understand what people think. And go from there.
And then to sum up, what have been your key learnings in what you've done so far work-wise with the whole Metaverse side of things? You know, what are the main takeaways you've got if you had to just list the top 3 or something?
From a technology perspective,
any perspective
was very interesting is we were looking at 5G. And then you have to say, okay, well, that's a great low latency technology for outside. You know, at the stadium when we do some of these overlays, you know, what you can't do is have something that works outside and you walk in the house and it doesn't. And lots of these metaverse experiences are going to be in the house, so they're going to be on fiber. Now, one of the key pieces that we didn't realize was the thing that will have to evolve to drive metaverse experiences isn't connectivity, which has to be there, and it is there. It's compute power. How do we make these really massively compute-heavy experiences like volumetric capture and play out when we've got devices such as AR glasses where we're trying to strip as much out as possible because they need to look good or people won't wear them, so they won't buy them, so you can't produce. So the big thing, you know, and where does that compute power sit? You know, operators are talking about edge computing. But if I'm going to produce a really expensive experience for my fans, it can only work on one operator. It can only work on 5G. So where do we put it? Do we put it all in the hyperscalers? Well, there is a latency piece there. So there are lots of things that people always talk about, internet connectivity. Actually, we're moving into a place where the limiting factor could be the compute power on the device.
Exciting.
Yeah, I think from our point of view, you know, advising rights holders at 7 League, what we would preach is that you can't wait, but you can't rush either. And I think learning the lessons from Web 2 as we go into Web 3, there's definitely a sense that people are rushing a little bit at the moment, and they're doing initiatives in Metaverse, VR worlds, which you know, they would get more views on one TikTok post. So there has to be an objective as to why you would do that. But you know, you can't wait. You have to do test and learn, and it has to be tied to your organisational objectives. But there's definitely a sense of, in your desperation to not miss the next Facebook, make sure that you don't catch the next MySpace. Right?
Very good. I like that.
Mic drop. Okay, cool. Brill. Thank you very much. And please give my speakers a round of applause. Well done. Thanks, guys.